church and business administration. My academic time at DBU has taught me that anytime you do a presentation, vast majority of people use a quote. I am no different in that respect. The quote that I have selected is from John Locke, and it focuses on finance and the difference between a little versus an abundance. And it says, "Our incomes are like our shoes. If too small, they gall and pinch us. But if too large, they cause us to stumble and to trip." The following slides provide a brief synopsis of the research I conducted on church financial administration. The words finance and church divert along a spiritual continuum for most congregational members. However, the research revealed the importance of financially supporting the mission of the church. In this case, Christians exist to continue the purpose of their ancestor, Christ, both spiritually and financially. In addition, there's a brief discussion on the biblical principles of finance, both in Old Testament and the New Testament. Understanding financial administration from a biblical perspective. Humanity does not create. Humanity can only rediscover, proclaimed the author of Ecclesiastes. Conversely, Stephen Covey adds that all things are created twice. There is a mental and a first creation, and a physical or second creation to all things. Jesus said the old woman gave out of her need based on her faith. However, Snyder contends today's parishioners give out of their disposable income in the name of faith because the concept of money and faith are often heresy amongst congregational members. Sadly, there are an alarming number of people distrustful of funding requests beyond regular tithing or stewardship, because in general, the first inclination is to distrust the motivation. The next two sections explore the derivative of such behavior, leading towards a bridge between faith and finance, or what most people are used to, money. Financial biblical perspective. This slide discusses the Old Testament story of Haman and Esther, in which Haman uses finance in order to finance death. The premise of Haman's scheme involved eradicating the Jews disguised as a favor to the king. The text provides the first reference of the term finance within the Bible, through my research. Whereas Haman proclaimed, "I'll deposit 375 tons of silver in the royal bank, finance the operation." Consequently, finance is supplied or is defined as the supplying of funds or capital or monetary resources of a government or corporate body. Interestingly, across Esther, death becomes the payment for life. Yet, through faith, Esther prevails and saves her people. From Haman's sinister plot, Haman gave from his assets and lost his life, and Esther relied on faith and gained her soul. Financial biblical perspectives continue. This slide discusses the New Testament. But before we move forward with the New Testament, a brief reminder of the Old. The Old Testament talks about death, and death is equated to blood. So in the past, in the Old Testament prior to the New Testament, death and blood was the payment. Blood was the payment for all things when we talked and communicated with God. It was the monetary exchange. As we shift over to the intertestament period, or dark period, that 400-year period between the Old and New Testament, there's an ushering in the shift of philosophy. What we see is the New Testament, with the advent of Christ, begets a new thing called grace. With grace, blood kind of is there, but Jesus has taken care of that. We now have grace and faith. And faith is now our payment for all things because of Christ. What you see is, as you continue, you notice that the embattled are made whole because of their faith. In Matthew 15:28, the Gentile woman's daughter is made whole. Through Mark 10:52, the blind man who could not see can now see. In John 14:12, Jesus declines, or actually he proclaims, that you can ask for anything in me, and if you believe and do not doubt in your heart, that it is yours to have. So he is telling the believer that faith is your payment for whatever it is that you are asking for. James C. Hunter proposes that faith is the only payment afforded to the believer. So, since faith is the only payment afforded to the believer, Luke 14:28-30 reminds us that all things that we are given comes much responsibility. He invokes financial responsibility, inferring that one must calculate the cost of a project and secure ample capital to bring it to fruition. 1 Timothy 4 proclaims, "For this is acceptable in the sight of God." In fact, David Richard Kesey proclaims that Francis A. Schaeffer's Institute of Church Leadership Development is committed to financial integrity, accountability in the management of the funds God has entrusted us. Furthermore, Powers contends believers must examine honest, trust, and related concepts from a biblical perspective. So the mandate moving forward is, since we are given all things through faith, we are held to a greater regard that we maintain and that we worship and regard Christ and his assets as if he was the one managing those assets, because as a result, he is.